Okay, this show is going to deal with an article that was published in the Albuquerque Journal. It has to do with a fight that's going on in the state house here in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, over the right of illegals, and I stress that again, illegal aliens being issued valid driver's licenses by the state of New Mexico. The headline reads, Legislatures, Governor gear up for driver's license fight. And I think you'll find this kind of interesting, even if you're not from New Mexico, because these are the kind of issues that need to be addressed. If the legislatures or the representatives that we've elected refuses to fix this, then we the people must rise up and replace those people. And like I said before, if we want this country back, we're going to have to go after everybody in the state and county levels and city levels, because this is crazy. And as I go over this article with you, you'll notice that the craziness just ain't from the Democrat side, it's also on the Republican side. The state of New Mexico has a Republican governor, Susan Martinez, and she's in support of the Republicans in the state house to back this proposal. The article starts out saying Santa Fe Republican-backed legislation that would end driver's licenses for immigrants who are in the country illegally, providing them instead with more limited driving privilege cards, was filed Monday, setting the stage for a clash in the 30-day session that begins in a week. Governor Susan Martinez and the Republican-led state house are promoting the plan as a way to bring New Mexico into compliance with the stricter identification requirements of the federal Real ID law. And it was filed even as a couple of federal installations began clamping down on the use of state licenses as ID. Just right there in that part, first of all, you got a Republican bill being introduced. Instead of denying these illegals the right to even drive in this country, they're going to allow them to walk in and file paperwork to get a whatever this limited driving privilege card, whatever that is. And this is how the Republicans are going to deal with this issue. They're so afraid of upsetting or being politically incorrect that they just refuse to do the job they're supposed to do and just say, hey, this is wrong. These people are here illegally. They're not here, within our laws and boundaries anyway. So why are you going to go and issue them any kind of document or give them any kind of official standing here in the United States? You're rewarding criminals is what you're doing, and I don't care what the PC crowd says about it. So let's go on here and read here. As of Monday, New Mexico licenses alone were no longer considered sufficient identification at the Army's White Sands Missile Range and Sandia National Laboratories. The state's Air Force bases were still accepting the licenses pending further word from the Department of Defense. Now see, what's happened is they've allowed all these illegals come in the country, start getting driver's licenses. There's other states who have issued driver's licenses too to illegals. So it's gotten so bad now that the federal government has to come out and say, hey, you know what, your state issued driver's license is no longer a valid ID card. So, what the heck? For years and years and years, a driver's license was the most valid picture ID you had. These elected officials have caused a situation that made these licenses invalid. But instead of addressing the real issue by getting rid of the illegals altogether, they're going to give them a special group and, put them in a special group, give them a special ID. We can't pick on those poor guys. So we're going to take it out on the citizenry. And as I go on in this article, you'll see that this is going to take, could potentially even take more rights away from New Mexico's citizens, while at the same time it's protecting a bunch of criminals that come here illegally. So it goes on to say the legislature's Democrats who control the Senate are expected to offer a competing proposal in the session: keep issuing driver's licenses to immigrants who are here illegally, but make clear the licenses can't be used for official federal purposes. Whoopee! You're going to give them a darn license, and basically that's going to allow them to vote. It's going to allow them to get all kinds of welfare and Social Security benefits and everything else. But, you know, not to worry, they can't use it if they want to go into a federal installation. Boy, that's comforting. Okay, so it goes on to say the Senate passed a similar proposal last year with the support of the Republicans in that chamber. Now I want you to hear that, because I'm tired of sticking up for the Republican Party. I'm leaving the Republican Party. I'm switching over to the Constitutional Party, mainly because of this kind of stuff. They're no better than the Democrats on their record with illegal immigration. They're for it. And the reason they're for it is because it's a form of cheap labor. And a lot of the, you know, if you follow along even with Obamacare, a lot of these corporations can hire these illegals, and now with the blessing of our government, and they don't even have to pay the Obamacare premiums that they have to on an American citizen if they hired them. So, you know, this whole thing just all ties together. It's one jumbled up mess. Under both the House and Senate proposals, a tier of Real ID compliant licenses would be created for U.S. citizens and foreign nationals who can prove their lawful status. Now, see, the first time in the United States, and any legal United States citizen is going to have to prove we belong here. They're going to treat us like the criminals. This is outrageous. This is like one of the stupidest things I can say. You know, it's like you got a group of people that come here illegally, breaking the laws, but we're going to reward them guys. We're going to make them feel like, you know, they belong here. But our citizens that have been born here, we're going to make them jump through hoops. And we're not going to allow them to, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but here in a minute it says, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security says New Mexicans, that's New Mexicans like me, you know, who lives in New Mexico. Some people don't even realize that New Mexico is part of the U.S. Trust me, it is. And it goes on anyway and says that New Mexicans will need another form of ID, such as a passport, to board commercial aircraft beginning 2 years from now if the state still has not complied with Real ID. Can you imagine that? All because of these illegals flooding over the border, which the government could have controlled, but refused to. Both the Democrats and Republicans are guilty. Now they're saying that in a couple of years, if these same Republican and Democrats don't do the right thing and comply with this federal ID program, I can't get on an airplane. Even if I'm going to fly to another state in the country, I cannot board an airplane. Now what kind of nonsense is that? I'm telling you folks, things are getting pretty bad around here, and it's about time some people wake up and smell the roses. We have no friends on either side of the aisle. None. So, you know, you should quit voting for people that you think you want to go have a beer with or you think is doing a good job. Vote for people who believe in the Constitution, believe in a secure America. You know, instead of taking some kind of campaign promise, you know, about doing something, look at their track record. If they've been elected before, look at their track record, see how they voted, see who's financing them, and then you can make a good decision on who should be in office. It goes on to say the Democrats in the legislature have ignored this problem for far too long, and now we are beginning to suffer the consequences, said Michael Longren, a spokesman for Martinez. The governor for the past 5 years has unsuccessfully pressed the legislature to repeal the 2003 law that allows the issuances of licenses regardless of immigration status, which she says has made the state a magnet for criminals and which she has repeatedly labeled dangerous. Now, I applaud what she's saying there, but it seems to me anyways, all during this past couple of years when illegal immigration came to light on a national level, you heard the governor from Texas and you would hear the governor from Arizona come out and speak out against illegal immigration. You never hear on a national level anything out of the state of New Mexico. It's like they want to hide in the shadows or something here. This year she is endorsing House Bill 99, filed in advance of the session of Republican reps Paul Patriot of Albuquerque and Andy Nunes of Hatch. I hope I said their names right. Repealing the 2003 language and creating a driving privilege card. This is like putting a Band-Aid on the problem here, folks. This ain't right. Forget these cards. The only card these guys ought to get, these illegals I'm talking about, is a card that gives them a free ride back to the border. And if they come back after we escort them out once, then they can get another card to go straight to the prison. That's all they need. Giving these people any kind of privileges to drive around this country, giving them voting rights, giving them benefits, is all unconstitutional. And every one of these people who have sworn to uphold the Constitution are breaking that Constitution. Every one of these elected representatives who promise to support and take care of the people of New Mexico are severely letting them down. And believe me, the state of New Mexico doesn't need to keep us down any more than they have. It's pretty rough here already. So now we're going to be told we can't even go to the Social Security office with a driver's license as a form of ID. I got to get a passport. You watch, if all this comes through, that's what's going to happen nationally though, by the way. I don't know, it'd be interesting to find out if similar problems are in similar states. But the problem is what they're doing is basically what Nazi Germany did and a lot of other communist countries and stuff. You won't be able to leave your state without a passport. And you won't be able to, you're going to have to report where you came from, where you're going, all that nonsense. If you think that's too far-fetched, then realize, we got Border Patrol checkpoints well within the United States of America. They're not on the border. They're 40, 50 miles away from the border. And they treat you like you're going from one country to another already. So it's not too far-fetched to see what's in the writing here for all of us if we don't stand up and say something about this. It goes on to say, and they're talking about the House Bill 99 here, it's based on a Utah law that Martinez said in 2011 she opposed. Longren said the fact that the governor has worked out a compromise similar to the Utah model is just another example of her willingness to find common ground on this issue. House Republicans said in a news release that House Bill 99 is an effort to compromise with Democrats and get the law off the books by providing undocumented immigrants with a driving privilege card and not a driver's license. What comes to mind is you hear all the time, we can't round up everybody. What did they always say? There's like, I don't know how many illegals here anymore. Probably more than anybody knows. But the point is, they say there's no way you can go around rounding these people up. Well, these people are going right to the Department of Motor Vehicles. How hard would it be to put a bus there and just wait for these people to show up and then, escort them to the border? End the problem. Then we wouldn't need these federal IDs and we wouldn't be threatened to lose our privilege of being able to board an aircraft. So, that all ties in now. If this all goes through in 2 years and Obama's executive orders on gun control goes through, so what? Everybody in the state of New Mexico wouldn't be able to own a gun then, because we're all going to be put on a no-fly list because all the illegal immigration. It's crazy. This is the mindset of America today, and this is the mindset that needs to end. So it says that the House Republicans said in a news release, the House Bill 99 is an effort to compromise with Democrats and get the law off the books by providing undocumented immigrants with a driving privilege card and not straight driver's licenses. House Democrats countered that the GOP should get on board with the Senate's proposal as a compromise, calling the House Bill 99 another example of Governor Martinez's and allies playing political football with this issue. Under the new Pacheco bill, the driving privilege card, which would be good for 1 year, would be issued only to those who cannot prove their lawful immigration status. That's a significant difference from the Senate proposal, which would make the second tier of non-real ID compliant licenses available to immigrants who are here illegally, but also to anyone else who qualifies for a real ID license but doesn't want one. House Minority Leader Brian Egolf, Democrat from Santa Fe, said, giving U.S. citizens the choice of whether to get a real ID license is key to the passage of a bill in the legislature. Without this option, all citizens will be forced to stand in line for hours at the MVD, that's the Motor Vehicle Department, just to renew their current licenses. I got news for you, they do anyway. This state is run by monkeys if you don't know it. It's a nightmare. Even in a small town like this one, to go to the MVD is an all-day trip. And it usually ends up in arguments with the staff there because they have nothing better to do than make your life miserable, trust me. Because they would, it goes on to say, because they would be required to have real ID compliant licenses, he said. Now I got to say something about this. It just kind of triggered a memory from about 3 years ago, I think it was, when I was at the MVD. There was another guy in a different line who was getting kind of a little bit irated at the helper behind the desk. And I didn't hear the beginning of the argument, but it struck me as funny at the time, He said to them, why don't you stop issuing illegal licenses to people, and then you could, basically free you up to do a better job with whatever issue he was. Unfortunately, I don't remember what it was. And I can remember her denying that the state even did this. So here it is a couple of years later, and it's headline news in the state's biggest newspaper about the battle over these driver's licenses. So my point is on bringing all that up is like, this corruption in Washington is just a mirror of what goes on in every government, every state government, because, a state legislature is still either mostly Republican or Democrat. They still file, if they have any dreams of going to the federal level, they're going to follow the pathway set out by their party. And that means cuddling up to all their supporters, financial supporters, and backers. So by the time they even make it to Washington, they've already been through, I don't know what you want to call it. They're not rookies anymore when it comes to corruption or taking money to pass laws that make no sense. And that's what all this is a nightmare created by a law that makes no sense. And why we even have a law in the books at this point that says illegals can have licenses is all political nonsense. It's PC bullcrap. And the people that pay for it are the citizens of the United States, the legitimate ones. We pay for it every day. We pay for it in loss of benefits. We pay for it in deterioration of the schools, because the schools, You know, the more kids they take on, and the more parents that can't afford to pay for lunch programs or whatever. All that puts a strain on these institutions. Okay, it says here, House Minority Leader Brian Egloff, Democrat, Santa Fe, said giving U.S. citizens a choice of whether to get a real ID license is key. Applicants for the privilege card would have to complete a driver's education course. Oh, believe me, I'm not against that. If you ever drove around New Mexico for 5 minutes, you would pray that some of these people went back to a driver's education course, whether they're here legal or not. They got to pass a written road test. Now, that brings up an interesting question. If that's a requirement, then all these people coming here can't speak a word of English. That means you're going to have to give them an interpreter. And that's one of my pet peeves about all this nonsense anyways. It was originally written that if a person came here and wanted to become a U.S. citizen, in order to qualify, they had to learn English. That's right, English. And that now that it isn't really pushed, go down to a local Social Security. I'm a big Social Security office with lots of people, you know, like in Albuquerque, a big city like that, and just sit in there and listen to all the different foreign languages of the people that there, and they got to have an interpreter on staff for each one of those languages. Just think of the money the government would save by requiring that everybody speak English. Now, if you were born here, you better have a good explanation why you can't speak English, because every public school in America teaches English. So there's no reason why, if you grew up here, you don't know how to speak English. If you just arrived in this country, there again, if the old standard was upheld where you must speak English, there wouldn't be a need to employ, you know, how many do you think there is? You know, tens of thousands of interpreters working for the federal government, all because they won't close down the border, all because they won't tell people, you know what, this is our country, it's an English-speaking country, if you want to live here, we'd be glad to have you, but you got to step up to the plate, you got to learn our ways, you got to learn our language, you got to want to fit in. It's not the other way around. The country does not fit into every individual that comes to the border. That's just ridiculous. And anyways, it goes on here to say the card would have to complete. Applicants for the privilege card would have to complete a driver's education course, pass a written and road test, submit fingerprints, and prove either that they have lived in New Mexico for at least 2 years, or that they have filed New Mexico personal income taxes the previous year. The card could not be used as ID for official federal purposes. A requirement under the Real ID Act would not be valid for ID purposes outside the state according to the legislation. The state's highest profile immigrants writes up Somos on Pueblo Unido immediately criticized the bill as senseless and reprehensible, saying it discriminates against immigrant families. Once again here, nobody is being discriminatory against people who have migrated here legally. You got to keep in mind this affects people that came here illegally. And I know with an illegal nut job in the White House right now, that the whole country is just, you know, being overrun. I just pray whoever comes along, and if we do have another president, which in my mind is still up for debate, whoever does though, if somebody can, you know, you hear it all the time. This is why I don't have much faith in them. You hear it all the time. We gotta step up and pass immigration laws because our system is broken, but yet they don't enforce the laws that are on the books today. So what's going? This whole thing is just a smoke and mirror political game, and the ones that are paying for it is the everyday citizens. And now in the state of New Mexico, the citizens are going to be really paying in a couple of years if this political game keeps being played. The House Minority Leader, Brian Egga, Democrat from Santa Fe, said giving U.S. citizens oh, we already went through that. Okay, hold on. Bear with me. It just goes on to speak more and more about what the requirements are for the state and federal. But I don't know. It's just crazy to think that citizens of the United States, in any state, could be refused passage on an airliner without a passport. And I'm not talking about going, on an international flight. I'm talking about going from New Mexico to Michigan or New York or wherever. It's just insane. It's getting to the point in this country where the government's going to track everywhere you go. And if you don't have their permission, you can't go. And that's where we're heading really, really fast with this stuff, people. We're supposed to be having an election coming up for President of the United States. Everybody knows that. We haven't had a real president in so long that I think people have forgotten what it would be like. But I'm afraid that so much of the power has been turned over to the UN, and the Senate has given up all its authority pretty much to the president, that the checks and balances put in place by the founders don't exist anymore. And don't even talk about the courts. The Supreme Court is another out of control organization that is thumbed its nose at the Constitution and is illegally creating laws, they think, anyway. So, what are you supposed to do? Well, hopefully you'll check all the candidates out. Look at how they voted in the past if they were in office in the past. And seriously, in prayer, thought, have a serious time alone to think about who it is. Don't listen to the outside nonsense. You got to go and you got to say, hey, is this the person that's going to live up to the Constitution and do what's right for this country, or is this just another puppet for special interest groups and UN sympathizers? And I find that interesting too. This all, to me, it's like connecting the dots. You start at the local level and you can work your way all the way up to the federal level. Now there's stories coming out that Obama is looking to get a place of authority on the UN. Maybe that's been his plans the whole time, I don't know. But the point is as dangerous as he's been as an illegal occupier of the White House, I do not call him president. I don't believe he is the president. So the illegal occupier in the White House now has aspirations of becoming a major figure in the UN. Well, he's already set up legislation in this country to make, from gun control to speech laws to, you name it. He has stripped power where he needed to strip it, and he's, if he does take the next step and goes to the UN, he just might, call in the UN troops around here, and we're going to have a choice. We're either going to submit or we're going to fight. That's all there is to it. But hopefully what I'm hoping to do with these shows is to expose as much of this nonsense as I can expose, try to shed some light on it, And then maybe through the education process, through open-minded people anyway. I know most conservatives already know most of this, but I'm talking about people who are on the fence here, who haven't gone one way or the other. This is your kids' country. This is your grandkids' country. It's not, and what's happened in the last 7 years certainly isn't. We're heading into a direction that I've never thought this country would be headed in. There's been several things over the last few years where I thought, man, this is going to cause a big backlash. People say, well, if he does this, I'm going to go out and protest, do whatever. And then when Obama does it, nobody says nothing. They don't say boo. They don't get up out their chair, and I don't know if you've seen her or not, but Shadow just came in to pay me a visit. So anyway, that's why I'm interested in doing this. It's the education. I'm not a Republican anymore. I voted Republican pretty much every election. I've never voted for a Democrat. Never would. But now I can honestly say, if I was given a choice between a independent and the other two, if the independent was a constitutionalist, if the independent believed in America, if the independent wanted to help us instead of harm us, I would tend to go with the independent. And maybe as we've reached a point, because even some of the founding fathers, like George Washington, I believe it was, if my mind's working right, was against the two-party system. He pretty much said that it would lead to the corruption that it has evolved into today. That's the difference between the leaders back then and the so-called leaders of today. Back then, they were men who had great character. They were people who were intelligent and thought things through. They would never do things like sign a law without reading it. If you remember, that's how Obamacare got passed. They would never do anything to deliberately hurt the country, because the country was still a baby back in those days, of course, but even up into the early 1800s, they might have had little disagreements here and there, but they usually found a way around the disagreement. But whether you were on one side or the other, these men would never ever stoop to the level of taking money under the table, stoop to the level of supporting the butcher of millions of babies in this country every year, would never dream of taking rights away from the American citizens that were protected under the Constitution. But today, these leaders are bought and paid for the most part. They have no allegiance to the American people whatsoever. They have an allegiance to whoever's paying their bills. But as this shows here, this story here on the ID shows, I hope it shows one thing. I hope it shows you that this corruption is on a local level. It's in every state, every county, every city, every town. And hopefully somehow I can help you understand the importance of every election, whether it's local or federal. Somehow the parents who currently have children in these schools need to start to go to PTA meetings, need to go to the school board meetings. You need to see what's going on. If you don't like it, you need to change the people that are in the leadership. Sitting around talking about these things is great, but we need action. This country cannot take any more inaction. I'm doing the best I can do with what I'm doing here. I hope through donations and as I pick up more and more experience, because I'm a rookie. This is actually the first article I have done a show on, if you want to call this a show. So it's all learning, as I get more comfortable with doing these things. And as hopefully more support comes in, we can start doing some more. But I've said it before. Some of my plans are, since the BLM has made such a big impact on the national stage, it wouldn't even hurt for you folks, go out and talk to the ranchers and say, hey, how's the BLM doing? Are they treating you fair? Are they, giving you a rough time? What's going on? That way you can get the true story behind, the events of the day. You're not listening to propaganda. You're going right to the source. Now don't go to somebody's ranch and give them a hard time, despite of what side you might be on. It's not the rancher's fault. The ranchers I think in some cases are stereotyped as these big villains that took over the West. I got news for you. The big villain of the day is not the rancher, it's the federal government. They go around to all these western states and they pick a plant or an animal species and say, oh, that's in danger, and then they take up take over thousands of acres. Now I'm all for preservation of the animal species, but there's got to be a balance. And that's true with all these laws. Except for the ID laws here. Who is all this going to hurt? The illegals that came here illegally? No. It's directed at the people who have lived here and been born here. And the rest of if these guys do not get off their duff, swallow some smart pills, and doing what's right, the only ones that are going to continue to pay are us poor folk. You always hear from the Democrat side, like the reason they supported Obamacare, which is a joke, because if you ever dealt with the federal health system, you knew Obamacare wasn't going to do anything. And matter of fact, I've been disabled for 20-some years, and now I can't go see my doctor. Obamacare did that. Obama's done that. Social Security has taken and taken and taken income and everything else from us, and now they get you to the point when you're truly a disabled person. They get you to the point where you feel worthless. Well, since I came up with this idea, I don't feel worthless anymore. I may be a nobody in the overall scheme of things, but I'm a somebody behind this camera, and the more time goes by, the bigger the audience becomes, the more stories I can share with you. Hopefully, one little voice will become many. And there was a quote, I can't remember who said it now, or the quote word for word, but basically it said that the first Revolutionary War was already won in the hearts, minds, and souls of the American people before the first bullet was shot. Well, that's kind of where we are today. We got to win over the hearts, minds, and souls of these people who unfortunately are being told in their best interest that, they need to follow this party's platform. But it's not in their best interest. Just like in this illegal ID nonsense is not in anybody's best interest. It's not in the illegals' best interest. It's not in our best interest. What would be more in the illegals' best interest is to be told the truth. Go home and apply for citizenship the right way. And then when you do come back with the mindset that you're going to be an American. Don't bring more nonsense about, I got to change America into my old homeland. No, that ain't gonna work. This country's made up of a lot of different cultures, and yes, it's nice to celebrate your own personal cultures or history. I'm sorry, heritage, and people should respect each other's heritages and their customs and stuff like that. But you don't force it on people. People are either going to want to come to you in interest about where you came from or who you are. But if you start forcing it on us, we're going to start biting back. And I think that's what you're starting to see, like with the protesters out in Oregon. I don't like using that. The Patriots out in Oregon. Excuse me. They are protesting, but what they did was for the country. Whether the country first recognized that or not is whether they even did the right thing at the time or not. That doesn't really matter. The matter is, I believe the Bundys and everybody else out there in Oregon are doing what they feel in their heart should be done. And they're not doing it for selfish reasons. They're doing it to protect us, every one of us, and expose a corrupt BLM system who makes terrorists out of ranchers. And then, you read other stories and the feds are turning around and using some of this land, not specifically out in Oregon where they are, but other lands that they control, the BLM and others, federal government, are selling the fracking rights and everything else overseas to China. So it really has nothing to do with endangered species most of the time. It didn't have anything to do with the turtle out in Nevada, other than the government wanted to. Henry Reed, one of my, there's a guy I just don't even know how he could ever got elected either, but he did. Anyway, it was Henry Reed, that whole issue, the Bundys, kept Henry Reed out of making a deal for some solar farm out there, but they had to move the turtles, and they wanted to move the turtles where the Bundys were. But see, the mainstream media won't put this kind of stuff out there, don't explain it very well. So hopefully that's what we're going to do here. I know this segment started over the driving license issues and exactly what's going to happen here in New Mexico to us, I don't know. I'm not naturally born here. My wife is. She's a Hispanic lady who was born and raised in Albuquerque, and the Albuquerque that she knew as a kid is not the Albuquerque that it is today. But the point is we're heading down a very scary, very dangerous, and very explosive path here. If either of these parties really cared about the American people and our welfare and our security, the borders would be closed. The illegals would be rounded up. The idea that the Muslim faith, Islam, is being pushed on people in this country is ridiculous. It wasn't allowed with Christianity. Why should we allow it with any religion, especially, in my opinion, the false religion of Islam? But like with the officer out in Philadelphia here, they got shot. You got the mayor coming out and saying that it had nothing to do with Islam when it's on the record that everything he did, and he even said, the guy said it himself, he did it because of Allah and Islam. We're not even being honest about it. So how can this nation fix any problem if we're not being honest about it? Same thing with the gun control. I don't know what Obama's going to say in his speech tonight, and I've been debating really debating whether or not I can torture myself to listen to another one of his speeches. I'm really tempted not to, but I don't know. I'll make up my mind. Part of me says I should because, I'm going to be doing these shows. But part of me says, after that gun speech, I just had enough. I mean, the guy is a joke. I mean, I shouldn't really say he's a joke because his policies do very bad damage to a lot of good people. But I mean, you stop and think about it, the Democrats always claim that they're the ones that are compassionate and all, but everything they do ends up hurting the people that they're supposedly trying to help. And then, it hurts everybody in the long run. I don't know. Up until Obama was elected, I never seen race as an issue. I mean, I've always had an open door policy at the dinner table. Anybody could, I don't care what race they are. I don't care what religion they are. As long as they come to my home and respect what my beliefs are. The same I would do if I went to their home, to a point. As long as it didn't conflict with my Christian views and my Christian faith. But the point is when I was growing up, you were respected you respected your host. You might not agree with them. You might not like what they gave you to eat, whatever. But you ate it out of respect. You treated those people with respect. If you had a difference of opinion, you could say so in a respectful manner, and nobody resorted to name calling or threatening war on you for any of that. And that's a shame that this country's but this is the kind of divide that Obama and his fellow Democrats have caused in this country, and now they want to turn around and blame it on conservatives. Every time there's a mass shooting, the first thing out of the left is, it must be an angry white guy, and then boom, when they're proved wrong, they shut up and go hide until the next incident. And it's like they're sitting around in the corner in the dark praying that the next mass shooting happens and it's a white guy, a white Christian especially. They'd love that. But they're missing the point. None of us should be sitting in the corner wishing for the next attack. None of us should be supporting these type of things. But yet it's become politically acceptable, mainly on the left, to do so. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this show, and I hope that, in the future that we can do a little more in depth on these type of things. I kind of enjoy getting the studio here set up and getting involved this way. It wasn't my intention to end up as a reporter, and I'm trying to get a couple of local people. There's a couple of pastors I know. I'm trying to get them to come in, do their own little show. And one of them I'd like to be actually my co-host. And the main reason I'd like to have this particular person as a co-host is because we don't always agree. And I think that makes for a better deal. If you got somebody you agree with all the time, it's kind of boring. I kind of like to have people around that are respectful but have different opinions. So anyway, I'm going to sign off for now, and thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. God bless you all. May God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Amen.